this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a C++ project in Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition, and also how to get started with if statements, if-else statements, and else-if statements. We're going to be using Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition today, which is free of charge to download. I'll pop a link in the description for this video of where you can get that from. One important thing to note is that you do not need this software in order to be able to debug or to code with C++. So there are some online alternatives such as cpp.sh amongst others. Again, I will add some links to the bottom of this video description to those alternate ways of debugging your C++ code. Okay, so let's get started. First thing we're going to do is open up Visual Studio 2019. And then we're going to create a new project. Now, for the purposes of these video tutorials, we're going to be going through using C++ as a console app. So you can see on the left hand side here I actually have my recent project templates. So I am also going to go through how to create a C++ project from scratch if you don't have your recent project template set up on the left hand side here. So when you first come into Visual Studio, you'll come into this screen here. What we're going to do is change our language to C++, and then we're going to look for console app. And then we're going to click next. Inside this, we're going to be doing what's called a conditional statement. Now, a conditional statement allows us to make some decisions in our code. So as we get into the code, you'll see this in practice. So now that I've got my project ready to create, I'm going to change the name of the project to Conditionals because that's what we're going to be working with today. I'm going to click on create, and we're going to wait for Visual Studio to do its thing in the background. It's going to create the file structure, and it's going to create the CPP file or C++ file ready for us to develop in. And you can see it's now ready for us to develop. So now we have our blank project. You'll notice there's some standard code which is given to us straight away, and this is kind of the bog standard application that we'd usually get. So I can actually run this straight away and it'll give me some output. So you can see on here I've got standard followed by, or std sorry, followed by two full colons and then the word cout. Now I'm going to run this just to show you what happens on the screen. So I've just clicked this play button at the top here to start the application. You can see it's now loading it. And then I'll get the console window. So remember, we are building a console app at the minute, which means it's going to look very similar to command prompt. So you can see here I've got my Microsoft Visual Studio debug console. And at the top I've got the words hello world. So if we look in the background, we can see application still here, or the code for application. And we can see here that we've got cout hello world. Now cout just simply stands for console out, shortened to cout. So that means it's going to give us some output onto the screen. So if I close this now, I'm going to add in a similar line to above, and I'm going to say cout hello mark. Okay, now notice here that I've missed the \n off the end of this code, but I'm going to run it just to show you what happens on the screen. So now you can see I've got hello world, and I've also got hello mark, which again matches up with my code base. I'm going to close that again. The reason why we've got our \n on here is because that adds in a new line for us. There are alternate ways of doing this, so I'm going to show you one of those just now. So an alternate way we can add a new line is to pass on to the end an additional parameter called endl. Now you can see that it says endl is undefined, which means it's not available for us to use just now. The reason being we haven't added in the standard namespace. So what I can do to this is say std full colon, and then endl, like so. Okay, we're not going to see much difference if I run that code now. It's just going to give me a blank line underneath when I run the console app. So what I am going to do, just to show you this working, is I'm going to get rid of this \n. I'm going to run my application, and we can see here I've now got no new line being created for me. So I've got hello world and hello mark on the exact same line, despite the fact that in Visual Studio I've got these written on two separate lines. Okay, so let's rectify that. So we're going to use our standard endl command onto the end of here. So we're going to say std and then endl. Run that again. So now once again you can see I've got that new line in there. So I've got hello world and hello mark on separate lines. So we can see that \n and endl here do the exact same thing. So there are some subtle differences between \n and endl. Those differences are that \n takes up 1 byte of memory, whereas endl doesn't take up any memory whatsoever. Endl also flushes the stream. So what I mean by stream is as you build your cout, or you build your data, there's what's called an input and output stream that your computer uses to be able to output memory locations or the data stored in those memory locations onto the screen. So every time I call endel, I'm having to clear the memory. So there is something we can do differently to prevent us from having to use std for our couts. What we can do with this is we can add using namespace std. We can now remove that, so we could simply have the line cout, and then if we wanted to use endel, we can get rid of std from the start of it. Now there could be an instance where I have multiple includes here at the top of my file. So let's consider we have two namespace files, one called foo and one called bar. Inside there, if they both had a function called cout, that would cause what's called a clash. And that would mean that we'd have to go back into one of these libraries that we've included at the top of our file and either change that function name or carry out some other significant changes to prevent that clash from happening. So it is better practice to leave this file out of your code and to use std in front of your commands such as cout. Okay, so now we're on top of some basics in coding in C++. We're now going to look to reduce and remove some of this irrelevant content in this file, and we're going to start to look at what's called a conditional statement. Now a conditional statement will allow us to make a decision based on some input from the user or some input from the program itself. So I'm going to get rid of all this code here. Remember, I've left using namespace stand at the top of the file here, so I don't need to use std in front of any of the commands I'm going to be using. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to cout just hello mark, which we had previously, so I'm just adding this back in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a variable. Now a variable is something that allows me to store some information which can't be changed. Now we need to get used to what's called a primitive data type in order to be able to create these variables. Now a primitive data type is something which is a common data type. So things such as integer, which is a whole number. Things such as string, which is a string of characters to make a word or a line of text. It's things such as char, which is a single character such as A, B or C. So in order to get us going with our conditional statement, I'm first of all going to set up a variable. Now in this case, I'm going to call it age. Everything in your application within reason should be commented. Commenting our code means that in the instance that we are working in a team, other team members can pick up our code, contribute, and also can pick up where you've left off if they take over from a project. At the moment, I've created a space in memory for me to store some information against a variable called age. So age is just the name of or a label of that area in the memory. So I can now recall age using cout, and at the moment I've not set any value into age. So let's have a look at that. So if I say cout age, so remember cout is console output, we're also going to comment this line. So I'm going to say output the age into the console. So whilst I've created the variable, I've not initialized it, I've not given it any data. So in order to do that, I've now added on equals 28, and that's set my age as 28. Now I've still got a green squiggly line under here, but if I do now run this code, I should get some output on the screen. So as you can see here, it says hello mark 28. So this is my cout command on the top line here, and then this is 28, which is ran through this cout command here. Now I'm going to close that, and what I'm going to do is do something different with this to show how we can use this variable now. So I'm going to say cout hello mark you are, and then I'm going to tag onto the end that age variable, followed by a semicolon to end that line of code. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to run it again. Now notice in here I have no \ns and I have no endels, so I've got no additional line spaces in there. Everything's just been output on one line. So if I bring this back over onto the screen here, you can see it says hello mark 28, hello mark you are 28. I'm going to remove my first cout also, and I'm going to comment this to say output the sentence with the age. And we'll see that I now get hello mark you are 28. Now the purpose of today's tutorial is to introduce you to C++, but it's also to get you used to what's called a conditional statement. Now a conditional statement will allow me to act upon this data now, and I'm going to use a variable I've created called age to do that. And the most basic conditional statement that we're going to look at today is called an if statement. To write an if statement, what I'd suggest you do is start off with the word if in lowercase, open and close some regular brackets, open and close some curly braces, pop yourself into those curly braces. Now I'm going to zoom this code in slightly so it's a bit easier to read. But now I've got my basis for my if statement. So I know that I'm not going to miss any brackets. I know that I'm not going to miss any curly braces. Now inside these brackets is where I'm going to write my condition, which is why it's called a conditional statement. So in this case, what I'm going to do is say if age, which is my variable name, is more than or equal to 28, then I'm going to output some additional text saying, yay, you are 28. Now I could also use age here, so I could do this, which is what I'm actually going to do. So you can see I'm now checking to make sure age is more than or equal to 28. So if I run this code now, you can see, hello Mark, you are 28. And then you can see my next statement, which says, yay, you are 28. Now I'm going to add in a backslash n on here to give me some additional spacing on that line, so you can see that I've got a new line there. I'm going to save that, and I'm just going to tweak this age just ever so slightly to show you how this now works. So if I reduce this age, so I'm going to say I'm now 26, and I'm going to run this code, we now see that I've got hello Mark, you are 26, but I don't have the output from this if statement here because this condition has stopped that from happening. So remember, we're checking if age is more than or equal to 28. At the minute it's 26, so we're not actually hitting this condition. So this is allowing me to act upon some variable or some sort of data. Now I could just as well create another if statement below here saying if true equals true, which we know it does, true equals true, it's fair enough, and then I can output true is true. Again, just a piece of text, but it's just to show you how this conditional statement works. So now if I run this code, and I'm going to pop a backslash n on there first of all, if I run this code, what we should have now is a hello Mark, you are 26, followed by the statement true is true, which we can see here. So the important thing to recognise here is what we're getting is a Boolean response. So what I mean by a Boolean response is either true or false. So 1 or 0, true or false. So in this code here, if I said, for example, true equals false, that evaluates to being false because we know true isn't the same as false, therefore they don't match. All I'm going to see is hello Mark, you're 26, and I'm not going to see anything within those if statements. Now if I just change this to true, again we know this is evaluating to true, so this shows exactly how that Boolean response is working. True evaluates to true, therefore it's going to allow me inside these curly braces, and it's going to run this code in here. We can now extend this if statement and we can add in some additional code onto the back of that. So at the moment Mark is age 26, so I'm going to write the word else, and you can see Visual Studio creates those curly braces for me and it pops my cursor right inside them. I've pressed enter once, and again it's giving me some nicely formatted code. It's indented by 1, and I'm now inside this else part of the if else statement. So now what I can do is say cout, your age didn't match the if statement. Okay, this can be whatever you want it to be. I'm just showing you what's going to happen when we don't match that condition. So remember, our condition in this case is that the age is more than or equal to 28. In this case it's 26, therefore it doesn't match. And we can now see that I get hello Mark, you are 26, and I get your age didn't match the if statement. So the condition in the if statement in this case hasn't evaluated to true. So by that, what I mean is that the age isn't more than or equal to 28, therefore we're now going to run the else part of that if else statement. Remember, it is good practice to be commenting your code throughout. So in this case I'm going to go back in and now comment this if else statement. So that's it for today's introduction to programming C++. Keep checking back for more videos. Remember to like and subscribe.